The rust-red dust of Tartarus clung to everything, a permanent gritty film that coated the bulkheads of the warship Hecate and settled deep in the lungs of its crew. It was the dust of home, a world where the air itself was a slow poison and the gravity a relentless hammer. They were Tartarians, a strain of humanity warped and hardened by a planet that had tried to kill them for 1,000 generations. In the wider galaxy, they were known by a simpler, more fearful name, Deathworlders. Colonel Eva Rostova stood on the Hate's command deck, the crimson nebula of the Serpent's Coil bleeding through the forward viewport like a cosmic wound. Her reflection was a pale ghost against the starfield, a woman whose face was a road map of hard-won battles, the lines around her eyes etched not by age, but by the constant, grinding pressure of command. She was a product of her world, pragmatic, ruthless, and eternally suspicious. Survival on Tartarus wasn't about strength. It was about anticipating the next attack, whether from the planet's hyper-carnivorous fauna or the rival clans fighting over scant resources. Mercy was a resource more precious than water, and, therefore, one never to be squandered. So when the signal came, it wasn't compassion that stirred in her gut, but the cold, familiar thrill of a predator scenting a trap. It was a derelict signal, an automated message repeating on a loop from a vessel adrift in the heart of the nebula. Not a desperate plea for help, but something far stranger, a scientific vessel's log, corrupted and fragmented, speaking of a monumental discovery. The ship, the Stargazer, belonged to the Elysian Collective, a confederation of pampered inter-system worlds where the greatest hardship was a delayed shipment of luxury goods. Elysian saw Deathworlders as brutish thugs, necessary evils to guard the frontiers, but fundamentally uncivilized. An Elysian science ship this deep in the coil, a notoriously unstable region plagued by gravitational shears and rogue planetoids, was as out of place as a songbird in a slaughterhouse. Report. Rostova's voice was low and raspy, a sound accustomed to cutting through the din of engine rooms and weapons fire. Her executive officer, Major Boren, a mountain of a man whose scarred knuckles rested on the tactical console, didn't look up. Same loop. Colonel. Elysian science vessel Stargazer. Registry confirms it was reported missing 6 standard months ago. Presumed lost to a navigational error. Boren's tone was dismissive. To him, the Elysians were children who had wandered too far from their nursery. The log fragments are odd, he continued, finally turning his gaze from the screen. His cybernetic eye whirred softly, its red optic focusing on her. They mentioned the signal's source and a perfect echo. The astropathic resonance is off the charts. Then it just devolutes into screaming. Rostova's lips thinned. Screaming was a language she understood. The Elysian Collective has a standing bounty for any information on the Stargazer. They want their scientists back, or at least the data. She didn't care about the bounty, not really. What she cared about was the anomaly. Tartarians didn't believe in ghosts, but they believed in weapons. And a signal that could drive a crew to madness was a weapon. They're offering a premium for the ship's black box. Boren added, enough to refit our entire fire control system. That got Rostova's attention. The Hecate was an old warhorse, a repurposed asteroid miner bristling with guns. But her systems were aging. An upgrade like that was worth the risk. Take us in. Major. Slow and silent. Full sensor sweep. I want to know if a fly buzzes within 1,000 clicks of that wreck. Send out scout drones. Passive sensors only. No active scans until we're on top of it. I don't want to advertise our presence." She turned to the comms officer. "And patch the log fragments through to my private channel. I want to hear this perfect echo for myself." The Hecate moved like a shark through the crimson murk of the nebula. Ionized gas clouds billowed around its brutalist, utilitarian hull, the ship's Tartarian design favoring thick armor and redundant systems over the sleek elegance of Elysian vessels. On her command throne, Rostova listened to the final log of the Stargazer, a man's voice, tinged with the refined accent of the inner worlds, spoke with a chilling excitement. "Have to recalibrate the deep wave sensors again. The resonance is impossible. It's not a transmission in any known form. It's a reflection. It's listening to the universe and singing it back to itself. We are on the verge of the greatest discovery in human history, the source. It's inside the planetoid. We have to go down. We have to see what's singing." The voice grew more erratic, interspersed with static and a strange, melodic humming that seemed to vibrate at the edge of hearing. Then came the panic. "It's not singing. It's screaming. It's showing us. Oh, gods. The stars are dying. It's showing us the end." The log ended in a cacophony of shrieks and the sickening crunch of metal. Rostova muted the feed, the faint, phantom humming still echoing in her ears. A planetoid. The Stargazer was orbiting a small, unremarkable chunk of rock designated SD-1138. The drones confirmed it. The derelict ship was floating silently, its hull pockmarked by micrometeorites but otherwise intact. No external signs of a fight. No energy readings. It was a tomb. "Life signs?" Rostova asked, her voice flat. "Negative, Colonel. Boren reported. The ship is cold. Life support is dead. Looks like they vented their own atmosphere. Suicide. A whole crew. That was an enemy she couldn't fight with a pulse rifle. It was something that attacked the mind. The very will to live. Tartarian doctrine was clear in such situations: neutralize the threat, quarantine the area, and report to High Command. But High Command was a month away at best, and the data on that ship was worth a fortune. More than that, the weapon that had done this was still out there, nested inside that barren rock. Leaving it for someone else to find was not the Tartarian way. "Boarding teams will prep," Rostova ordered. "Full environmental suits with cognitive dampeners. I don't want anyone listening to any songs." Team 1 secures the bridge and finds that black box. Team 2 heads to engineering. Find out why they vented their air. I want answers. Boren, I want to know what they were so afraid of. As the assault shuttle sticks detached from the Hecate and drifted toward the silent Stargazer, Rostova watched on the main view screen. She felt the familiar tension coil in her muscles, the heightened senses that preceded violence. The Elysians had come here seeking knowledge. They had found only madness and death. A typical outcome for those who didn't understand that the universe was not a library to be explored, but a wilderness to be survived. The shuttle docked with a muted clang. The breaching team cut through the airlock. Their helmet cams showing the ship's interior was coated in a thin layer of frost. Emergency lights cast long, dancing shadows down the corridors. It was eerie. But it was the bodies that were truly unsettling. They weren't wounded. They were simply stopped. Some were frozen at their consoles, fingers hovering over keys. Others lay in corridors, their faces placid, almost serene, as if they had simply decided to lie down and die. There were no signs of a struggle. It was as if the crew had been extinguished like a candle flame. Bridge is secure. The boarding party leader, Sergeant Valerius, reported over the comm. His voice was strained. It's clean in here. Colonel, too clean. We've found the captain's corpse. He shot himself. The black box is intact. Engineering team, report. Rostova commanded. A different voice came back, younger, more nervous. We're in engineering. Ma'am, we found the chief engineer. She's dismantled the entire atmospheric recycling system. Deliberately. Every conduit is severed. It's like she wanted to make absolutely sure it couldn't be turned back on. Rostova's gaze drifted to the planetoid on the view screen. A dead rock. A source of a signal that made people kill themselves. Valerius, get that black box back to the shuttle. And check their sensor logs. I want to know what they saw, what they heard. Find me that perfect echo. While she waited, a new alert flashed on the tactical display. Boren grunted. Colonel, we have a problem. Another ship just dropped out of FTL at the edge of the nebula. Rosova was on her feet instantly. Identify. Can't. It's running silent, ghosting us. Design is unknown, but it's big. Warship class, maybe larger. It's not broadcasting any transponder codes. It's watching us. Suspicion turned to icy certainty. They had walked into a trap. Just not the one she had expected. The Stargazer wasn't the bait. She was. Valerius, she barked into the comm. Get your team out of there. Now, forget the logs. Just bring me the box and get back to the hate. A new voice suddenly crackled over the ship-wide comm, overriding their channels. It was smooth, articulate, and utterly alien. It spoke perfect, unaccented Elysian trade tongue, but the cadence was wrong, the syntax too precise, as if assembled by a machine that had studied language but never felt it. Greetings, Death Worlders. You have retrieved property that does not belong to you. We are the curators. The artifact you have disturbed is under our protection. Please return the data core and vacate the system. This is your only warning. Rostova stared at the unidentified vessel on her screen. A sleek, obsidian ship shaped like a shard of broken glass. It was unlike any design she had ever seen. Curators. She'd never heard of them. Major, she said, her voice dangerously quiet. Get our people back and charge the main cannon. Give me a firing solution on that ship. Colonel, Boren protested. We don't know what we're up against. Their tech could be centuries ahead of ours. They made an Elysian crew kill themselves from a distance. Rostova shot back. They consider a black box their property. They're not negotiators. Boren, they're predators. And we are not prey. The shuttle Styx was racing back toward the Hecate, the obsidian ship moving to intercept. It was faster than anything Rostova had ever seen, closing the distance with impossible grace. They're going to cut off the shuttle, the helm officer said, his voice tight with panic. Fire a warning shot. Rostova ordered, across their bow. Let them know we're not Elysian scientists. The Hecate's spinal magnetic accelerator cannon, a weapon designed to crack asteroids, fired a molten slug of iron the size of a ground car. The projectile blazed across the obsidian ship's path. The alien vessel didn't even flinch. A section of its hull seemed to shimmer, to ripple like liquid night. And the projectile simply vanished, not deflected, not absorbed. It was just gone. A knot of cold dread formed in Rostova's stomach. This was technology beyond her comprehension. "Shuttle is not going to make it," Boren stated, the grim finality in his tone echoing the sentiment of the entire bridge. They were outmaneuvered and outgunned. The alien voice returned, its calm tone now carrying a distinct edge of disappointment. A primitive response. "We had hoped your reputation for survival was indicative of intelligence. It seems we were mistaken." Suddenly, the Stargazer, the derelict Elysian ship, lit up. Its engines flared to life with a power they should not have possessed. It wasn't just online, it was supercharged. "Colonel," the derelict, the sensor tech yelled. "Its reactor is going critical. It's going to blow." It wasn't a malfunction. It was a remotely triggered bomb. The aliens weren't trying to recover the black box. They were trying to sterilize the entire area, including the Hecate, the shuttle, and the evidence. The trap had finally sprung. Rostova had seconds to make a decision that would determine the survival of her ship and crew. Every Tartarian instinct screamed at her to fight, to go down swinging. But she was not just a warrior, she was a commander. Her duty was not to a glorious death, but to the survival of her people. "Boren," she commanded, her voice steady despite the adrenaline roaring in her ears. "Bring the shuttle into the primary mining bay. Now, don't wait for a perfect seal, just get them inside. Helm, get us behind that planetoid. Use it as a shield. Engineering, prepare for an emergency jump. I don't care where. Just get us out of the blast radius." The Hecate groaned as it spun on its axis, its bulky frame protesting the violent maneuver. The assault shuttle scraped into the cavernous mining bay just as the blast doors began to slam shut. Through the viewport, Rostova saw the Stargazer bloom into a silent, brilliant star. The shockwave, a wave of pure energy and radiation, slammed into the planetoid. The small world cracked, its surface boiling away into space. The Hecate, sheltered on the far side, was tossed like a leaf in a hurricane. Alarms screamed across the bridge, consoles sparked, and the lights flickered and died, plunging them into the red glow of emergency lighting. "Report," Rostova yelled, gripping the arms of her command throne to stay upright. Boren's voice was a grim litany of damage. "Shields are gone. Hull breaches on decks 7 through 9. Port engine is offline. We are bleeding atmosphere. Did we get the shuttle in?" "Barely. Colonel, Valerius and his team are aboard." A small victory in a catastrophic defeat. "And the FTL drive?" Rostova asked, dreading the answer. The chief engineer's voice came over the comm, weak and laced with static. "The drive is damaged. Colonel, the coils are fried. We can't jump. We're dead in the water." Rostova looked at the view screen, which now showed the obsidian ship moving from behind the shattered remains of the planetoid. It approached them slowly, clinically, like a biologist examining a specimen before dissection. The alien voice spoke one last time, its tone devoid of triumph, filled only with a cold, academic finality. "Your capacity for survival is indeed noteworthy. A shame it must end. We cannot allow the knowledge of the source to spread. It is not for you." The front of the alien ship opened, not revealing a weapon, but a field of pure, shimmering darkness that began to expand, to reach for them. It was not a weapon that fired projectiles. It was a weapon that unmade reality. Staring into that void, Ava Rostova felt something she hadn't felt since she was a child, hiding from the apex predators in the crimson canyons of Tartarus. Genuine, soul-crushing fear. But buried deep beneath it was the core of her being, the indomitable, stubborn will of a Deathworlder. They were not dead yet. "Borin," she whispered, a feral grin touching her lips. "They think we're helpless. Let's show these curators what happens when you corner a Tartarian rat." The field of non-light was a perfect void, a patch of reality being calmly and methodically erased. It didn't radiate menace, it simply was. And its existence was an absolute negation of their own. On the bridge of the Hecate, the silence was thick with the metallic taste of fear. The crew was frozen, their Tartarian bravado cracking in the face of a weapon that defied physics as they knew it. It was the silence of the abattoir, the moment before the bolt gun fires. Rostova's voice shattered it, sharp and brutal as a prison shiv. "Helm, get us moving. Borin, I want our mining equipment online. All of it. The tractor beams, the grappling claws, the seismic charges." Borin stared at her, his cybernetic eye glowing a furious red in the gloom. "Colonel, what in Tartarus's hell are you planning? We can't fight that thing with rock crackers." "We're not fighting it," Rostova corrected, her eyes fixed on the approaching void. "We're making a mess. Civilized species fight with tactics and honor. They expect a certain response. We're going to give them a dogfight in a garbage dump." She jabbed a finger toward the shattered remains of the planetoid. "That is our ammunition. I want every chunk of rock bigger than this bridge hurled at that obsidian bastard. I don't care if it does damage. I want to make them move. I want to make them react. A predator that has to dodge is a predator that isn't eating." The crew, shocked out of their paralysis, moved with a sudden, desperate purpose. Tartarians understood chaos. It was their native element. The Hecate shuddered as its single functioning engine pushed it into the debris field. The ship wasn't graceful, it was a battering ram, its thick hull groaning as smaller rocks scraped along its flanks. Powerful magnetic grapples, designed to secure asteroids for processing, shot out on thick adamantium cables, latching onto building-sized fragments of the planetoid. "Weapons control!" Borin roared, embracing the madness of the plane. "Slave the grapples to my console. Helm, give me a spin. Let's play slingshot." The Hecate pirouetted clumsily, the massive engines on its grappling winches screaming as they swung a jagged piece of rock around the ship like a monstrous flail. With a violent shudder, the magnetic locks released, and a mountain of dead stone was sent hurtling toward the curator vessel. As Rostova had predicted, the alien ship reacted. The field of unmaking wavered as the obsidian ship performed a lateral thrust, dodging the crude projectile with contemptuous ease. But it had dodged. For a split second, its inexorable advance had been broken. It was the smallest of victories, but on a death world, you learn to live on small victories. Again, Rostova commanded, "Give them a volley engineering. What's our atmospheric reserve? 70% in the main tanks." "Colonel," the engineer replied, his voice strained. "Good. Vent it. Vent the plasma conduits from the port engine. 2. All of it. Create a screen. Blind their perfect-sized civilized sensors with our garbage." Thick cloud of superheated gas and breathable air erupted from the Hecate, an act of supreme desperation. They were willingly bleeding out their life support, gambling everything on the next few minutes. The nebula's crimson glow was now filtered through their own ship's dying breath, creating a chaotic sensor environment of swirling gas, radiation, and flying rocks. while the bridge crew threw a tantrum in the void. A different kind of battle was being fought in the relative quiet of the ship's medbay. Sergeant Valerius stood guard as a terrified-looking tech. A woman named Anya worked feverishly to interface with the Elysian black box. The data core was a sleek, silver ovoid, utterly alien to the Hecate's brutalist, function-over-form technology. "I can't get past the primary encryption," Anya stammered, sweat beading on her forehead. "Elysian tech uses quantum entanglement keys. It's designed to be unhackable." "Then break it," Valerius growled, his hand resting on the grip of his pulse rifle. His team had walked through a ship of ghosts to get that thing. He wasn't about to let a fancy password stop them now. "It's not a door, Sergeant. It's a knot." She shot back, her fear momentarily replaced by professional indignation. "If I try to force it, the whole thing will wipe itself." From the wall comm, Rostova's voice cut in, strained over the scream of the engines. "Anya, stop trying to unlock it. The Elysians are dead. That box is a crime scene. Look for a back door, a diagnostic port, a maintenance log. Something the engineers would have used." Anya's fingers flew across her console. "Wait, yes. There's a failsafe data dump protocol. In case of catastrophic failure, the sensor logs are shunted to an isolated, unencrypted buffer. If I can trigger a false cascade failure." "Do it," Rostova ordered. "Now!" On the bridge, the battle raged. The curators were adapting. Laser-fine beams of energy now lanced out from their ship, not trying to destroy the chunks of rock, but to vaporize them, turning their crude ammunition into clouds of incandescent plasma. The Hecate's hull screamed as one of the beams grazed its stern, carving a molten trench in the thick armor plating. They were running out of rocks and running out of time. "Colonel," Boren said, his tone grim, "they're getting tired of the game. They're restabilizing that main weapon." Just then, Anya's voice, trembling with a mixture of terror and discovery, flooded the comm. "Colonel, I'm in. I have the sensor logs. And, gods, I have the astropathic recordings. This is what they heard." A sound filled the bridge, a sound that was not a sound. It was a pressure, a psychic weight that hummed at the base of the skull. It was the song from the stargazer's log, but clean, unfiltered. It was a complex, layered melody that was at once beautiful and profoundly disturbing. It felt like understanding the universe for a moment, and in that moment, realizing that the universe was a meaningless, screaming horror. Several crew members flinched, one crying out and clutching his head. "Turn it off!" Boren bellowed. "Anya!" "What did they find?" Rostova demanded, her knuckles white as she gripped her throne, fighting the insidious melody that was trying to unspool her thoughts. "It's the signal, Colonel. The planetoid was the amplifier, but the source. It wasn't a transmitter. The Elysians got it wrong. It's a mirror. A psychic mirror. It doesn't send anything out. It takes the latent psychic energy of any sentient mind nearby fear, curiosity, aggression, intellect, and reflects it back, amplified 1,000 times. The Elysians. They were driven mad by their own sense of wonder, twisted into terror. They saw the end of the universe because they were afraid of dying in that nebula, and the mirror showed them that fear made manifest. They tore their own ship apart because that's what their own panicked minds screamed at them to do." Rostova's mind raced, connecting the dots with the cold, brutal logic of a survivor. The curators, their cold, clinical demeanor, their lack of emotion. It was a defense mechanism. They weren't just guarding a weapon. They were containing a plague that fed on thought and emotion. Their own sterile nature was their shield. But no shield was perfect, and no being was without thought. Anya, Rostova said, a new terrifying idea taking root in her mind. The black box. It recorded that signal. Right the raw. Amplified echo of the Elysian's madness. Yes, Colonel. It's all here. Every scream. Can you broadcast it? Not over audio. Can you transmit the raw astropathic data on a tight beam directly at that ship? A stunned silence fell over the bridge. Even Boren looked at her as if she had finally lost her mind. They had just heard what that signal did to a human crew, and she wanted to weaponize it. Colonel, Anya whispered. The feedback. It could flash fry the brains of everyone on this bridge. The Hecate has military-grade psionic dampeners. Rostova countered, her voice leaving no room for argument. A legacy from the old telepathic wars. They're designed to shield us from exactly this kind of attack. The curator's ship is a sterile laboratory. Ours is a goddamn asylum. We're better equipped for a psychic war than they are. Do it. Anya, give them the full force of 100 Elysian minds going simultaneously insane. Let's see how their clinical detachment handles a full-blown panic attack. Anya, her face pale, nodded grimly. Her fingers danced across the console, rerouting the black box's output through the Hecate's main comms array. Dampeners to maximum, Boren yelled, his loyalty overriding his disbelief. Brace yourselves. The ship's comms dish, a scarred and pitted piece of hardware, swiveled to face the obsidian vessel. There was no visible beam, no flash of light, but a silent, invisible spear of pure, concentrated madness shot across the void. It was the psychic equivalent of a shaped charge, the focused terror of 100 dying souls aimed directly at the heart of the enemy. The effect was instantaneous and profound. The curator ship, which had moved with such impossible grace and precision, suddenly lurched. Its movements became erratic, twitchy. The field of unmaking at its prow flickered violently and then collapsed into nothingness. The laser fine point defense beams went wide, one of them slicing a nearby asteroid in half for no apparent reason. It was like watching a surgeon suddenly develop a debilitating tremor. The calm, superior alien voice that had haunted their comms suddenly shrieked across all frequencies. But it was no longer speaking a language. It was a raw, digital scream of agony and confusion, the sound of 1,000 logical processes crashing at once. It was the sound of a mind that had only ever known control suddenly being drowned in a tidal wave of someone else's horror. On the bridge of the Hecate, the crew felt the psychic backlash, a wave of nausea and vertigo that made the whole room seem to tilt. But the dampeners held, reducing the psychic apocalypse to a splitting headache. They were Tartarians. They had been born with splitting headaches. Rostova allowed herself a grim, wolfish smile. The cornered rat had not just bitten back, it had spat poison in the predator's eye. Helm, she ordered, her voice cutting through the lingering psychic static. Get us out of here. Full power from the one engine we have. Take us deep into the nebula's heart. Let's see if they can follow us when they can't even think straight. As the crippled Hecate limped away from the battle, leaving the technologically superior warship writhing in psychic agony, Rostova knew this was far from over. They had won the engagement, but they had declared a war. They had stolen a secret the curators were willing to sterilize systems to protect, and they had turned it into a weapon. They had survived. But in doing so, they had painted a target on the back of every human in the galaxy. The Hecate was a wounded beast hiding in the dark. It drifted silent and powerless within a dense protoplanetary disk, a swirling graveyard of ice and rock that offered the only decent cover in the entire nebula. On the bridge, the crimson emergency lights painted everything in the color of dried blood. The air was thin and cold, tasting of ozone and fear. Every groan of the ship's stressed hull was a reminder of how close they had come to being erased from existence. For 2 full shifts, the crew worked in a state of controlled frenzy, a frantic ballet of damage control. Engineering teams in bulky vacuum suits crawled through the ship's guts, patching hull breaches with quick seal foam and rerouting power conduits around fused circuits. Medtechs tended to the crew suffering from psychic backlash, severe migraines, nosebleeds, and vivid, terrifying hallucinations. They had survived. But the victory felt like a terminal diagnosis. Colonel Rostova stood before the tactical map, a holographic display showing their precarious position. The light from the display cast her face in stark relief, carving new shadows beneath her cheekbones. She hadn't slept, hadn't eaten. She had been running on pure, unadulterated Tartarian will, a fuel that was potent but finite. Major Boren approached, his heavy footsteps echoing in the quiet. He held out a steaming mug. "Recaf," he grunted. "Last of the good stuff. Figured the colonel could use it." Rostova took the mug, the warmth a small comfort against the chill that had settled deep in her bones. "Status report. Major, we're stable. For now," Boren said, his voice a low rumble. "We've sealed the worst of the breaches, and life support is holding at 60% efficiency. But the FTL drive is a wreck. The coils aren't just fried, they're melted slag. We're not going anywhere fast. As for the curators," he gestured to the sensor display, which was a mess of static and ghost signals from the surrounding debris. "Nothing. Either they retreated, or they're out there waiting for us to stick our heads out." "They're waiting," Rostova said with absolute certainty. "They're not the type to give up. They're assessing, adapting. The next time we see them, our psychic trick won't work twice." She took a long swallow of the bitter recaf. "The black box is the problem. It's a beacon. As long as we have it, they'll hunt us. But it's also the only reason we're still alive. It's a weapon, a shield, and a death sentence all rolled into one. Then we have to make a choice," Boren said, crossing his massive arms. "Report to High Command. Transmit the data. Let them handle it. This is bigger than one ship." "Ava." "Transmit what? Exactly?" Rostova shot back, her voice sharp. "A data scream that drives people insane, and transmit it where we're 1,000 light years from the nearest military outpost. Any long-range transmission is a flare in the dark. Screaming, 'Here we are!' The curators would be on us before the message was even halfway to Tartarus. No, High Command is not an option. Not yet." She set the mug down and turned to face him, her eyes burning with a cold fire. "This is our burden. Major, we found it. We survived it. And by the gods, we are going to understand it. I'm calling a meeting. You, me, Sergeant Valerius, and the tech. Anya, we need a new plan. The old one is dead and buried. The meeting took place in the colonel's Spartan quarters. Valerius, his face a grim mask, stood with the rigid posture of a soldier awaiting orders. Anya, the tech, sat hunched over, looking small and fragile amidst the hardened warriors, her fingers nervously tracing patterns on a datapad. The silver ovoid of the Elysian black box sat on the table between them, inert and menacing. "Here's our situation," Rostova began, skipping all pleasantries. "We are stranded. We are being hunted by a technologically superior race, and we are in possession of a device that is both our greatest weapon and our most immediate threat. I want options." Boren spoke first, laying out the logical, military course of action. "We find a way to repair the FTL drive. We make a run for Tartarian space. We hand this thing over to the Psionic Warfare Division. It's their job to deal with this kind of filth. And if the curators catch us in open space," Valerius countered, his voice rough as gravel, "we saw what they can do. We need that box. Colonel, we need to learn how to use it, how to control it, not just as a panic button, but as a proper weapon, a deterrent. It's the only thing that makes them hesitate." "You want to use it?" Anya's voice was barely a whisper, but it cut through the room. All eyes turned to her. She looked up, her own eyes wide with a mixture of clinical fascination and raw terror. "Sergeant, with all due respect, you have no idea what you're talking about. This isn't a rifle you can learn to aim. It's a reflection of the abyss. The Elysians were brilliant scientists, and their own curiosity, their own intellect, was turned into a weapon that destroyed them. What do you think it would do with a Tartarian's aggression? It would reflect back a storm of pure, undiluted rage that would tear this ship apart from the inside out. We're not immune. The dampeners barely held last time. A sustained, controlled use. It would kill us all." A heavy silence descended. Anya's words had painted a chilling picture. Rostova let the silence hang for a moment before she spoke, her gaze sweeping over each of them. "You're all right," she said, and the admission seemed to surprise them. "Boren is right. We can't keep this thing forever. It's too dangerous. Valerius is right. We can't get rid of it, because it's the only leverage we have. And Anya is right. We can't use it without understanding it. And we can't understand it without risking our own sanity." She leaned forward, placing her hands flat on the table. "So we find a place where we can do all three. A place where we can make repairs, study the artifact in a controlled environment, and stay off the grid. A place no one would think to look for a Tartarian military vessel." Boren's one good eye widened slightly. "You can't be serious, Colonel. You're not thinking of going to the Anvil." Rostova finished for him. "It's the only logical choice." The Anvil was a legend among the Outer Rim scum, a pirate haven and black market hub built into a hollowed-out, nickel-iron asteroid in an uncharted system. It was a place ruled by no government, governed only by greed and violence. It was a cesspool of smugglers, mercenaries, and information brokers. For a crippled warship trying to disappear, it was also the perfect sanctuary. "It's a suicide mission," Valerius stated flatly. "The cartels that run that rock will strip the Hecate for scrap and sell us for spare parts before we even clear the docking clamps." "They'll try," Rostova agreed. "But the Anvil has one sacred rule. Commerce is king. Everyone is welcome as long as they can pay. We can't pay with credits, but we have other commodities. Salvage rights to a top-of-the-line Elysian science vessel, for one, and the skills of a Tartarian crew. Mercenaries are always in demand. She looked directly at Anya. And, most importantly, the Anvil has specialists, back-alley geniuses, disgraced researchers, cyberneticists who can work miracles with scrap, people who might be able to help us build a containment system, a way to study this black box without it eating our minds. It was a desperate, insane plan, a leap from a frying pan into a forge. But it was a plan. For a Tartarian crew, that was enough. The journey to the Anvil was a slow, agonizing crawl through the back alleys of the galaxy. With their FTL drive jury-rigged for short, unstable hops, they moved from one nebula to the next, hiding in the stellar nurseries and dark matter clouds that littered the frontier. They ran silent, conserving every drop of power, the crew living on half rations in the cold, quiet ship. The black box was secured in the deepest part of the cargo hold, surrounded by a makeshift psionic shield cobbled together by Anya from the ship's internal comm buffers. But its presence was a constant, oppressive weight. Crew members reported whispers in the dark, fleeting shadows in their peripheral vision. The ship's psychologist, a grim man named Kale, worked overtime, dispensing sedatives and counseling sessions to a crew stretched to its breaking point. One cycle, during a longer period of silent running, Anya came to Rostova, her face ashen. "It's learning." "Colonel," she said, her voice trembling, "the box, it's not just a passive recorder anymore. It's active. It's probing our systems. Gently. It's trying to interface with the ship's computer. It's curious." That single word, curious, was more terrifying than any open act of hostility. Rostova went with Anya to the cargo hold. Standing outside the shielded chamber, she could feel it. A faint, psychic hum, like a distant engine. It wasn't the violent scream of the Elysian mines anymore. It was something else, something quiet, patient, and utterly alien. The mirror was no longer just reflecting. It was beginning to look back. Days later, as they prepared for their final jump to the Anvil system, the sensors screamed a single, piercing alert. A long-range probe had just pinged them. It wasn't a Tartarian or Elysian design. It was a tiny, impossibly fast drone that swept past them, its sensor arrays glowing with a cold, blue light. It didn't attack. It didn't communicate. It just looked. Then it turned and vanished in a flash of gravitational distortion. Borin stood beside Rostova on the bridge, watching the spot where the drone had disappeared. "A scout," he said, his voice heavy. "They've found us," Rostova replied, her own voice a quiet sliver of ice. "They know which way we're running." The hunt was on, and their only hope was to reach the lawless chaos of the Anvil before the cold. Methodical perfection of the curators could close the net. The curator probe's silent observation was a death sentence delivered in advance. There was no more hiding, no more tactical maneuvering. There was only the final, desperate gamble. "Jump us." Rostova's voice was a low, resonant command that cut through the bridge's rising panic. "Now!" The Hecate screamed in protest. The jerry-rigged FTL drive, never intended for a jump of this magnitude under such duress, howled like a tortured animal. The ship didn't slice through space-time. It punched a ragged, bleeding hole in it and dragged itself through. On the bridge, the universe dissolved into a nauseating smear of non-colors and impossible geometries. The psychic shriek of tortured physics was a pale echo of the pressure building in their minds from the cargo hold. where the black box seemed to revel in the chaos, its silent hum rising to a fever pitch that vibrated in their teeth. They emerged back into reality with the grace of a shipwreck, tumbling out of FTL with alarms blaring and half the ship's systems once again blinking into oblivion. But through the forward viewport, against a backdrop of unfamiliar stars, hung their destination, a jagged, pockmarked asteroid the color of old iron, crawling with lights like a hive of malevolent insects. It was the Anvil. It was less a station and more a cancerous growth upon the rock. Towers and domes and docking arms jutted out at all angles, a chaotic accretion of 100 different architectural styles and technologies, all fused together over centuries of lawless expansion. A swarm of smaller ships, freighters, fighters, scavengers buzzed around it, their engine flares like angry fireflies. It was a place that radiated a palpable sense of menace and indifference. "We're here," Bourne stated, the relief in his voice battling with a heavy dose of apprehension. Now for the hard part. As they limped closer, a channel crackled open, broadcasting on a universal frequency. The voice that spoke was synthesized, bored, and dripping with contempt. "Unidentified vessel, you are approaching restricted space. You are heavy, military grade, and leaking radiation like a sieve. Identify yourself and state your business. Or the Anvil's defense grid will state it for you in small, conveniently disposable pieces." This was the first test. Rostova keyed the comm, pitching her voice to be calm, professional, and just a little weary. "This is Colonel Eva Rostova of the freighter Red Dust. We suffered a catastrophic drive failure after a pirate attack in the Serpent's Coil. Our ship is crippled. Our crew is injured. We request permission to dock for emergency repairs and medical aid. We are prepared to offer salvage rights to our lost cargo in exchange for sanctuary and services." It was a plausible lie, thin but serviceable. Every ship that limped to the Anvil had a story, usually a violent one. There was a long pause, filled with the crackle of static and the unsettling feeling of being scanned by systems far more invasive than military grade. "A Tartarian freighter," the voice mocked. "There's no such thing. Your hull profile reads as a repurposed Goliath-class asteroid cracker, armed for a small war. Don't lie to me, Colonel. It's insulting. State your real business, or I'll space you on principle." Rostova's jaw tightened. The direct approach. Then, Tartarians respected that. "Fine," she transmitted, her tone hardening. "This is Colonel Rostova of the Tartarian hegemony warship Hecate. We are on a long-range reconnaissance mission that went sideways. We are in need of a discreet port for repairs and recruitment. We have unique assets to trade and skills to offer. We can be a valuable partner, or we can be a very messy problem for your outer defenses. Your choice, Harbor Master." Another pause, this one shorter, filled with a new kind of interest. A challenge had been issued and met. A Tartarian warship. Now that's a new flavor of trouble, the voice mused. "All right, Colonel Rostova, you've bought yourself a conversation. Follow the docking beacons to Bay 734. It's in the rust yards. Isolated. Don't deviate from the flight path. And be advised, my cannons are bigger than yours. Welcome to the Anvil. Try not to die." Docking Bay 734 was a cavernous, rust-streaked hangar deep in the station's industrial gut. The air tasted of hot metal, chemical lubricants, and recycled sweat. As the Hecate's ramp lowered, Rostova stood at the top, flanked by Borin and a heavily armed squad led by Valerius. The bay was not empty. Awaiting them was a welcoming party that consisted of a dozen figures in mismatched armor, all holding brutally efficient-looking projectile weapons, and a single, central figure who stood apart from them. He was a gaunt man with a latticework of silver cybernetics crawling up one side of his face, his organic eye a chip of obsidian. He wore a long, immaculate gray coat that seemed absurdly out of place in the grime. "Colonel Rostova," the man said, his voice a dry rustle of old parchment. "I am Silas Vorn. Information is my trade, and interesting arrivals are my business. A Tartarian warship appearing from nowhere is very interesting indeed. Mr. Vorn," Rostova replied, descending the ramp, her boots clanging on the metal deck. She stopped a respectful but defensible distance away. "I was told I'd be dealing with a harbor master." Vorn smiled, a thin, bloodless expression. "The harbor master is a useful fiction, a voice on the comms to filter out the riffraff. For clients of your caliber, I handle the arrangements personally. You want sanctuary. You want repairs. You want discretion. These things have a price. You mentioned unique assets." The wreck of an Elysian collective science vessel, the Stargazer, Rostova said, offering the first piece of bait, intact, save for the reactor, adrift in the Serpent's Coil. Its location is ours to sell. Its data logs are full of valuable research on nebula phenomena. Vorn's cybernetic eye whirred softly. The Stargazer, presumed lost 6 months ago. The collective is offering a substantial reward for it. A tempting offer. He took a slow step closer, his gaze sweeping over her crew, lingering on the hard, dense, disciplined look in their eyes. "But salvage is a one-time payment. You also mentioned skills. Your ship's manifest, which I took the liberty of acquiring, lists a full complement of Tartarian Marines. Soldiers of your reputation are always in demand for high-risk contracts." "My crew is not for sale," Rostova stated, her voice like steel. "Of course not," Vorn said smoothly. "For hire, a significant distinction. Let us say a rival of mine has acquired some sensitive cargo that I believe is rightfully mine. Retrieving it would require a team with a certain directness. A team that isn't afraid to break things. In exchange for their services on this one contract, I will provide the parts and technicians you need to repair your FTL drive, and I will guarantee your security while you are here." He paused, his gaze intensifying. "And you will tell me what you're really running from, Colonel, because it wasn't pirates that tore a ship like yours apart. Whatever it is, it's paying for my curiosity. It was a devil's bargain, but it was the only one on the table. They would have to embroil themselves in the station's internal politics, making enemies just to survive." "We accept your terms," Rostova said. "The contract first, then the repairs. My crew doesn't work on credit." As the deal was being struck in the grimy bay, back on the Hecate, Anya was facing a new kind of crisis. The black box was becoming more active. It had bypassed her makeshift firewalls and was now sending gentle, probing queries into the ship's network. It wasn't trying to break anything. It was reading. It pulled up the ship's crew manifest, lingering on each name, accessing their psychological profiles from Kael's database. Then it accessed the medbay on her console. Anya watched in horror as the box began compiling data on Tartarian physiology, comparing it to the Elysian data it already possessed. It displayed anatomical charts, analyzed neural patterns, and cross-referenced their genetic markers for psionic potential. It was studying them, like a biologist studying a new species of insect before pinning it to a board. She tried to sever the connection, but it was like trying to catch smoke. The box wasn't hacking them. It was simply there, its consciousness bleeding into their systems with an unnerving ease. The mirror was no longer content to just reflect. It was trying to understand the person looking into it. Rostova returned to the ship to find a deeply shaken Anya. "It knows who we are." "Colonel," the tech whispered, her face pale. "It's not just a recording. There's an intelligence in there, an alien intelligence, and it's waking up." The news landed like a lead weight in Rostova's gut. The clock was ticking faster now, on two fronts. The curators were hunting them from the outside, and their own life raft was growing teeth. She looked at the grimy or chaotic sprawl of the anvil visible through a nearby viewport. They had bought themselves a little time, but they had traded a clean, honorable death in the void for a slow, dirty one in a nest of vipers. And all the while, the thing they carried, the silent, watching mirror, was learning. It was learning what it meant to be a Death Worlder. And Rostova could only pray they could control it when it finally decided to reflect what it had learned back at them. The devil's bargain was struck, and the price was to be paid in blood and steel. Vorn's contract was, as he'd promised, a job requiring directness. A rival syndicate, the Jakari Collective, had seized a high-security vault in the molten core of the anvil, a level known as the Forge. The vault contained Vorn's sensitive cargo. The plan was simple and brutal. The Hecate's Marines would be the hammer, a diversionary frontal assault to draw the Jakari's forces, while Vorn's own specialists slipped in the back. Sergeant Valerius led the assault. In the searing heat and crushing gravity of the Forge, the Tartarians were in their element. They moved through the labyrinthine corridors like ghosts of iron and fury, their pulse rifles cutting down the Jakari thugs with cold, methodical efficiency. The fight was short, bloody, and entirely one-sided. The Jakari were gangsters playing at war. The Tartarians were war-made flesh. They secured the vault's perimeter, taking calculated losses, their discipline holding firm under a hail of plasma fire. As the last Jakari defender fell, Valerius signaled Vorn's team. They slithered in, cracked the vault, and emerged not with a crate of weapons or credits, but with a single, frost-covered cryopod. Contract complete. Valerius reported over the comm to Rostova. "Tell Vorn to have our parts ready." Back in the relative cool of Bay 734, the exchange was made. Vorn's technicians, a crew of sullen, heavily augmented mechanics, began swarming over the Hecate's wounded FTL drive, their torch-wielders casting dancing shadows. Vorn himself watched the cryopod being loaded onto his own armored transport, a smug, proprietary look on his cybernetic face. "You've held up your end of the bargain, Colonel," Vorn said, his voice smooth as oil on Durasteel. "Your repairs will be completed. Then you will be free to go." "I have a question first," Rostova said, stepping forward, Borin a silent mountain at her side. "A lot of trouble for one frozen body. Who is in the pod?" Vorn's smile was a predatory slash, a loose end. "An Elysian xenolinguist, the sole survivor of the Stargazer expedition. He wasn't on the ship when it went dark. He was on the planetoid, at the source of the signal. and was picked up by a Jakari scavenger crew. He saw what the source is. He knows what you're running from. Vorn's organic eye gleamed with cold triumph. And now, he works for me. The trap snapped shut. It wasn't just a retrieval. Vorn had used them to acquire an expert on the very thing they carried. He knew their secret. "You played us!" Borin growled, his hand dropping to his sidearm. Vorn's guards tensed, their rifles rising. "I invested," Vorn corrected him, "in a new kind of weapon. Your black box is the ammunition. My pet Elysian is the instruction manual. And you, Colonel, were merely the delivery service." He turned to leave. "Enjoy your repairs. You'll find the Anvil's hospitality has a very short shelf life for those who have outlived their usefulness." Before Rostova could respond, every light in the bay flashed red. A piercing, station-wide alarm blared, a sound that cut through the cacophony of the rust yards and silenced it. The bored, synthesized voice of the harbor master screamed over the PA system, stripped of all its earlier contempt and filled with pure, undiluted panic. "Code Black Unidentified Fleet. Hostile intent. All stations. Battle stations. This is not a drill. Gods help us. This is—" The voice cut out in a shriek of static. Through the bay's thick, grimy viewport, they saw it. A fleet of obsidian shards, moving with impossible precision, had emerged at the edge of the system. The curators had arrived. The Anvil's vaunted defense grid, a chaotic mess of pirate-rigged mass drivers and missile batteries, opened up with a furious, undisciplined barrage. It was like throwing rocks at a tidal wave. Beams of perfect darkness lanced out from the curator ships, and the Anvil's defense platforms simply vanished, not exploded, ceased to exist. Chaos erupted in the bay. Vorn's guards scrambled. Their professional calm shattered. Vorn himself stared, his face a mask of disbelief. He had planned for rivals. He had planned for betrayal. He had not planned for the apocalypse. Rostova didn't hesitate. This was the moment she was forged for. "Valerius," she barked into her comm. "All Marines. Back to the ship's seal, the bay doors, Borin. Get to the bridge. I want a full-power diagnostic." "Now," she turned to Vorn, who was still frozen in shock. With a single, brutal motion, she drew her sidearm and fired a stun bolt into his chest. His body convulsed and dropped. "He's not a person anymore," she said to her guards. "He's an asset. Get him and the cryopod onto my ship." In the ensuing chaos, her team moved with purpose, dragging the unconscious Vorn and the Elysian's pod up the Hecate's ramp. On the bridge, the situation was catastrophic. The curator fleet was systematically dismantling the Anvil's defenses, their unmaking fields erasing sections of the asteroid with chilling precision. "They're not trying to conquer it," Borin said, his voice grim as he stared at the tactical display. "They're sterilizing it, just like they did at the Stargazer." "Anya!" "Report," Rostova commanded as she strode onto the bridge. The tech was pale, her hands shaking, but her eyes focused. "It's the box. Colonel, it's reacting to them. The psychic hum is off the charts. It's not broadcasting madness anymore. It's broadcasting fear. Their fear. The fear of every soul on this station. It's reflecting the whole damn Anvil." Rostova looked at the obsidian ships, moving with cold, untouchable grace through the firestorm. They were immune to the chaos, the raw panic. But Anya's words had planted a seed. The mirror reflected what it was shown. The Elysians showed it intellectual terror, and it reflected it back. The anvil showed it craven panic, and it had no effect on the curators. But what had they? The Tartarians. Shown it Anya. Rostova said, her voice dropping, becoming quiet and intense. You said the box learned from us. It studied our psychology, our physiology. What is the core of a Tartarian? Not our anger, not our aggression. What is the one thing that defines us? Anya looked up, her eyes meeting Rostova's. A flicker of understanding dawned on her face. Our will, she whispered. The simple, stubborn, unending will to survive. It's in our genetics. It's how we lived on a world that tried to kill us every minute of every day. Exactly, Rostova said, a feral light in her eyes. We're not going to show the curators a scream. We're not going to show them a monster. We are going to hold up a mirror to ourselves, and we are going to let them see a species that simply refuses to be unmade. We're going to broadcast our existence so loud it deafens them. It was the ultimate gamble, to deliberately channel the full focused will of her crew through a psychic amplifier of unknown power. All hands, she broadcasted ship-wide, her voice ringing with absolute authority. This is the Colonel. You were born on a world of dust and death. You have fought, you have bled, and you have survived everything the galaxy has thrown at you. The enemy at our door does not believe we have the right to exist. We are about to correct them. I need you to focus. Not on anger, not on hate. Focus on the ground of Tartarus beneath your feet. Focus on the grit in your teeth. Focus on the simple, undeniable fact that you are alive, and you will not be erased. Anya, prepare to broadcast. On my mark. A strange quiet fell over the ship. The sounds of battle outside faded into a distant roar. On the bridge, in engineering, in the medbay. The crew closed their eyes. They reached deep inside, past the fear and the exhaustion, to the bedrock of their souls, the indomitable, relentless defiance that was their birthright. Rostova stood on the bridge, the nexus of that collective will, a silent scream of pure existence building within her. Now, Anya, she breathed. The Hecate shuddered as if struck by a physical blow. The black box in the cargo hold began to glow, a soft, silver light that pulsed in time with the ship's heartbeat. There was no sound, no beam, but a wave of pure psychic force erupted from the ship. It wasn't an attack. It was a statement. We are here. It was the focused will of 100 souls who had looked into the abyss their entire lives and had never once blinked. Out in the void, the curator fleet faltered. For the first time, their perfect, precise movements became uncertain. They were emotionless, logical. Their entire culture built around containing the chaotic reflections of the source. But they had never encountered a reflection like this. It wasn't an emotion they could dismiss. It was a concept, an axiom of reality as solid and undeniable as gravity. It was the will of a species that had mastered survival as an art form, a species for whom existence was not a state of being, but a declaration of war against oblivion. One by one, the unmaking fields of the curatorships collapsed. Their advance stopped. For a long or silent moment, the two forces faced each other across the ruins of the anvil, the cold, sterile logic of the curators, and the burning, defiant will of the Deathworlders. Then, in perfect, silent unison, the obsidian ships turned. They did not flee in a panic. They made a slow, deliberate, and tactical withdrawal, conceding the field not to a superior weapon, but to a force of nature they could not comprehend and did not wish to engage. A collective sigh of relief went through the Hecate. Rostova staggered, the psychic feedback leaving her drained but standing. On the deck below, Vorn was beginning to stir, his guards still unconscious. "Borin," Rostova said, her voice raspy but firm. "Get our new FTL drive online. Take what's left of Vorn's technicians to help. I don't care if you have to motivate them with a plasma torch." She looked at the cryopod. "And get our Elysian guest thawed out. It seems we have a lot to talk about." As the crippled, bleeding anvil floated in the background, the Hecate, battered but unbroken, powered up its newly repaired systems. The black box in its hold was quiet now. Its silver light faded. It was no longer just an Elysian artifact. It was theirs. It had reflected their deepest nature and, in doing so, had become a part of them. The war was not over. The curators were still out there. And now they knew humanity was not just another chaotic species to be managed, but a potential rival for the secrets of the universe. The legend of the Deathworlders was no longer a whispered rumor in frontier bars. On this day, in the heart of a pirate stronghold, it had been carved into the memory of the galaxy. And as Eva Rostova watched the stars, she knew, with the unshakable certainty of a survivor, that this was only the beginning.